Here we go. Okay, so welcome to Face Ripper Records, Tear Your Fucking Face Off podcast. My ambition today in this episode is to do something that's a little bit outside of the usual. Here's an extreme metal artist. Let's talk bands, releases, and that, and bring something else, but a little bit more educational. I've discovered a gentleman called Wiley. He runs something called Coyote Music, a service that provides reviews for all scopes of music. I discovered when I released my track Banged Up, which was a kind of brutal black metal affair, which was slightly outside of the scope of your usual bread and butter, but you appreciated it all the same. And since then, you've become a kind of staple of my campaign. And I've learned that you obviously have a passion for music. You're an instrumentalist and player in your own right, and you've had experience working as a music advisor at the University of Texas and much more. All of this I'm eager to explore and hopefully get some nuggets of wisdom that are transferable both to musicians starting out, musicians listening, but artists that are on my label, and who knows, even myself as well. So welcome to the podcast, Wiley.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben. This is exciting. I've done a few podcasts, none as metal as this one.
Wow. Man, that's cool. So go on.
In honor of the metal feel, I wore a combination. I'm located in Austin, Texas, and so I wore my hybrid shirt here. That is the Slayer logo with Selena's name, or the Queen of Tejano pop. This is a shirt that's very popular around Texas. Selena it was a crossover in Spanish and English, and kind of helped connect Mexico and Texas a little bit more musically. So I wear this around Austin, and people are, they're either Slayer fans or they're Selena fans or both. So
I see. Okay, cool. That sounds really interesting, because I'm completely on the other side of the pond. So you read all sorts about the Americans and Mexico and the goings on, and not a lot of it's positive. So it's good to see some unison through the medium of music over in that corner of the world as well.
Absolutely. No, I've got. We might get to some stories of there's plenty wrong going on all over. The U.S. certainly has its ups and downs, but yeah, I mean, especially for the sake of this podcast, and in the music world, I've always seen something about music is what brings us together. Rarely are people doing music just hating each other as they play and things like that. Maybe within a band. Sure, but
yeah. Well, I've certainly been to a few gigs where the audience have hated me, but yeah. So musically, where did it all start for you?
It started for me in elementary school. My older siblings took piano lessons, so there was music in my house. But I was growing up in Texas, and in Texas, American football is very popular at the high school level. And I was never an athlete, and I didn't really care about what was happening on the field. But what happens at halftime is you have marching bands that go out on the field and parade around.
Yes, I've seen some of that. It's pretty extreme. And even on a smaller level, in England here, we'd do that. We wouldn't even do that at the national level, but it seems to be a huge thing, even at your local level, from what I know anyway, which isn't much.
Sure. I grew up in a tiny town in the desert of West Texas, just 100 miles from the nearest big city. But my sisters were in the marching band, and so I used to hang out up by the drum section. And I just, regardless of whether they were playing some concert piece or some top 40 hit or whatever, I was just underneath the drums, and I got the musical bug then, and just really haven't stopped since. And that was eons ago.
You don't look, it was that far ago. So it was drums. Is that your instrument?
Yeah, the drums have always been what's spoken to me. Every band, the first thing I see, whether there's an amazing singer or a great guitarist, I listen for the drums, because that sets the bottom of what's happening. It sets your foundation. And if you have the best guitarist and singer and bassist in the world, and the drummer isn't supporting that, the band is not going to be good. It's just not.
Yeah.
That's my drummer's perspective. I love that. I gravitate toward rhythm sections more than the melodic stuff, at least in my upbringing.
Yeah, no, cool. drums is something I've always looked at. My passion is keyboards. I'm obsessed with these black and white things. They're just endless possibilities. And then I tried to get into bands and my high school sort of phase, and you just couldn't get the level of commitment sort of required. And that was just something that just seemed to sort of carry along with me. So I then picked up guitars to then filling out what I was doing. And then obviously I use like sequence drums and what have you. But I've always looked at drums. And I'm like, I'd love to be able to live somewhere or have the space and the money and the accommodation of the noise. I'd love to get into it, but I also appreciate that I'm a human being that's aging and has limitations. So it's probably a little bit too late now. But I admire anyone that can absolutely go for it on the drums. It's huge stamina required, more so than being a keyboardist and things like that. So I have a huge respect for drummers, and and good drummers and reliable drummers are exceedingly rare.
Drummers have I think, a well-earned stereotype of being the undependable member of the band, the one who shows up late or whatever. But
it's the most crucial part of the music, because it's the rhythm and it's about being on time. But drummers are not on time in the other aspect.
well, it's I mean, even as long ago as This Is Spinal Tap, they made fun of their drummers dying and just drummers rotating. That's not that far from the truth. Every band, it's you have the songwriter, which is usually the melodic instrument person. Maybe the singer writes lyrics. That's generally right. Maybe the bassist. But they usually just get any chump who can hit to sit in on drums. So yeah, when you find a drummer that can show up and play and rehearses and is responsible, those drummers tend to be in pretty high demand.
Oh yeah. I've been to sort of like live nights and stuff, and I've seen the same drummer work with three bands. Two of them he was in. One of them, their drummer didn't turn up or something.
Oh, that's funny. When I was in college, I was in a couple different bands, and they were not very closely related genre-wise, but I worked with both of them. I wanted both of them to be famous. I wanted us all to be famous rock stars, and there was more than one gig where I would book them back to back. We'd have an opening act and then one band, and then I would just change the drum head to have the other band's shirts to fit the genre a little bit closer.
That's awesome. Style of the hair slightly different. So you picked up drums. You started playing in bands. Where did it go? How did you end up then being involved in the university and even the Coyote music and the concept? What was the professional journey?
Yeah, so mostly I was educated on drums in school, and I was in band, whether it was concert band or marching or whatever. But ninth grade, my parents were kind enough to get me a drum set. My other siblings got piano lessons. I got a drum set.
God bless them.
And immediately, this was in the mid to late 80s, and I was just, my hair is a reflection of the music that I liked during that time. Just way into 80s.
Mine isn't.
Hair, and so immediately I was in a cover band in our tiny little town in rural West Texas, playing Cheap Trick and Kiss and Ozzy and just all of those things, mainly 70s and 80s rock. And that kind of helped me figure out what a band was and how it works. We weren't very good, but we were passionate in a small town. But I came to college after high school. I went to the University of Texas at Austin, which is where I am now decades later. And Austin has the nickname the live music capital of the world.
Really?
It's a little pompous.
It's yours, own it.
Right. Yeah, the goal is to always try to live up to that moniker. But so immediately when I got here, I found other musicians and formed bands. So I've been playing in bands really around this city since the early 90s. And, was more in one of my first popular bands was more like 10,000 Maniacs, just really kind of folky, funky music. And sort of a pop punk band with 3 lead guitarists.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, that must have been a battle of egos, no?
The soundmen hated us. 3 guitarists. So I started gigging in clubs for real, around Austin, Texas. And one of my bands in particular became pretty well known. We would be the band on Saturday night, the headliner, if you will, and we had a decent draw, and we put out a CD, and it sold pretty well, and everything. And we got to a point where we thought, man, if we could replicate this in a larger city, we would be world famous. And so a few of us moved to New York City. We're like, let's do this in New York.
That's a very different, like a different culture, a different world. No,
we didn't know that at the time, but you're absolutely correct. No, the style of music that we did and our live show and everything was not really conducive to audiences in New York City. But in New York, there's so much music business there. Los Angeles is more rock and roll oriented, and New York has always been more hip hop and dance oriented. I mean, there's plenty of rock music there, but it's not the primary genre. But there was enough of a music industry there that just by virtue of opening for different bands or having somebody else play you, you met so many people in the music business. It really started opening doors of how record labels work. And one of my big I got a job for, it was only a little over a year, but I worked with Universal Records as an A&R.
Right.
So here I was, this kid who drummed and managed a couple bands in Austin, Texas, working at a major label. And to be honest, I felt like a spy on the inside.
And you've got the I'll be picking bands and stuff, and if this is and suddenly we have this kind of mindset that these major record labels are all these really experienced people kind of picking the new talent, but really they just kind of drafted you in and been quite something on your shoulders.
What's really interesting is that people, at least at that time, who signed bands and developed bands were not musicians.
Okay.
Instead of being in bands, they went into the industry. Just not very many at all. I think that was the thing that really surprised me is, but you don't know, but it educated me on the flip side that the general audience for any, if you become famous, your audience is not primarily musicians. Your audience is just Jim and Joe and Jane down the street.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think, we'll talk a little bit about Coyote music later, but one of the reasons I formed the company I did was I think a lot of people in bands think too musically and not on a broader sense.
That's an interesting point, because I'm a composer myself, and I always I'm going to push this, I'm going to push this technically, I'm going here and going there, and I mean my sort of genres of music are not for Joe and Jane down the road, but yeah, that's quite insightful. I had the people picking music to kind of distribute on their companies and to promote. They were more musical minded than they were, but obviously it's a commercial thing. And you look what's popular. We were super popular. A lot of us musicians kind of just hold our head when we hear it. It's like, really, is that what's number one this year? But yeah, it's the stuff that goes on everyone's car radio on their jaunt to work and back and what have you. Interesting perspective.
Yeah, the interesting thing is it's not necessarily a good or bad thing to view it from one side or the other, but something I learned that was valuable, because as a teenager, you listen to the radio and you say, I like that song. Let's play a song like that song so that we can succeed. The error in that line of thinking is that band was signed a year ago or a year and a half ago, and they wrote that song a year before that. So what you are hearing that is popular was really, I mean, that trend is over. Like the music is out and people are enjoying it, but if you replicate now, you are 2 or 3 years behind the curve of where music is going.
Yeah. And also perhaps my kind of measure of advice to people, with musicians or in any other endeavor, is that people tend to buy people, and inauthenticity is highly detectable. For example, I won't name the gentleman, but there's a musician that's coming to mind. He's kind of put out an album and it was sort of like this, which was surrounding his favorite genre, and now he's kind of writing his second album, and now he's kind of practiced and got over that exposure and getting over the of it all. his second album is now, you can hear that it's just so much more him, and it's so much better for it. And it's like, yes, you for yourself, which I'm sure is a process that everyone is going through. This it's not to denigrate anyone in that, but I do think the authenticity, you'll find your audience for it, or you even create an audience for it.
Authenticity to me is, if I have one lesson or piece of wisdom to pass on to anybody watching this, it is what attracts people, listeners or investors or anyone, is seeing something so passionate you can't deny, you can't not like it. When your music first came on my radar, as you mentioned, I'm not into death metal. It's not what I listen to day to day, but in the music, it's absolutely undeniable to say this guy is doing this with every ounce of his and soul and tears and you had a really powerful up of your podcast talking about a tragic loss in your life.
Right.
And
yes. Oh wow. Yep.
You can't not put that every song you write. You can't be at your key or programming a drum part and think, I'm gonna half-ass this one, or just steal that drum loop I heard the other day. You are not going to do that.
No.
And you're correct. All comes from your music.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You can see it in eyes and in expressions.
Thank you. That's a huge comment. It's always nice to, yeah. It's rare, to actually kind of speak to people and and get that kind of feedback. One where me and Mike involved in a genre that is perhaps is a small slice of the music pie across the world. And when you hear feedback like that, it's like, yes, okay, I know what I'm doing is right. We always have moments that we doubt ourselves, and I think I'm past that, but it's wonderful to hear, and I can't thank you enough, man.
I guess something that helped me reach that level of understanding or that perspective. That's my take. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. I mentioned my move to Austin and playing in bands. Around that time, I graduated from school, and one of my first jobs out of school was that I became the undergraduate advisor. That just means 4-year college advisor at the University of Texas School of Music. And so what that person does is when a new kid into the university, I help them choose their classes and help them choose their degree plan and how they're going to through school. And I loved that job. It might be my favorite job I've ever had, because you have musicians who are insanely talented. That was primarily a classical music school at the time,
right?
Which I was very ignorant to music, just extremely ignorant. Other than having heard of Beethoven and Mozart, that was basically it. But I had these people who were so much more skilled and trained than I still am. And the first day of college, they're thinking, if they were an opera singer, oh, I want to sing, in all the opera houses across Europe. Or if they were, a violinist, they see Itzhak Perlman, and like, oh, I want to play on stages where my name is up in lights.
Yeah, and the next Paganini and all that.
Right. You want to keep that passion. You can't give up your goals, or why are you doing anything every day? But I found myself, and there was no script. I didn't get the job, and then somebody taught me how to advise students. But we just all know only so many people who have their name on the billboard.
Yeah.
World-renowned soloists are just, a percentage or 1,000th of a percentage of everyone who plays violin. So helping people stay focused on their goals and aspirations and keep putting that passion and that energy into it, but also not being blinded by a goal that is almost inachievable. Like, keep it there, don't give up on it, but also understand that there is more in the world than being that person.
Absolutely. I kind of get that point, because one of the roads I go down, and I was a prisoner for a period of time. cocaine addiction and money going missing when I had a financial services kind of practice. And I was musical all my life before then, but a couple of years when I came out, I was determined to invest in my music much more, try and encourage as many people as possible to invest in their unique and innate sort of talents as a way of surpassing the vicissitudes of life. And then that's how everything sort of came about. So I had a sort of goal. I wanted my music to be successful. I wanted my experience to turn into something successful. But you can't let the high goal kind of blind you to all the other opportunities that are available. I find that if you aim at something, that might not be the place you get to, but the journey along the way, you kind of sharpen your aim off and you go off for that, and something else comes up. And 2 years later, I have various different sort of streams of income. I'm now doing this, I'm doing a bit of that. I'd never imagined myself getting AI videos, let alone actually making AI videos for other people. And whilst these things aren't nothing to do with filling stadiums or being a successful musician, but they are lending themselves to fund and immerse myself in a network of the same, which is of greater value. Probably much like the same with yourself. You've got little bits and pieces that you're doing, which we're about with Coyote Music.
Yeah, I think yeah, you're right on with using the example of the kid coming to university with one idea of what success means. That success is being the solo artist with your name in lights, making $1 million. If that is the only vision of success, like what it shows an unawareness that there's several definitions of success, perhaps many definitions of success. So many musicians, especially in the rock music realm, thought signed to a label is success.
It's not the thing it's meant to be sometimes. The reason I set up Facebook for what it is a few months ago was when I started my podcast, I was obviously dealing with bands and I became friends with their members. And some of these bands went on to get signed. I was using my legal background to review contracts and what have you. And I was all for it and I supported them along the way. And then a year or a couple of years later, some of these people are sort of coming back and saying, well, we put out all of this money. They asked us for this and that. And then nothing happened. They did a few social media posts and nothing. And I kind of, I mean, it's nothing to do with me, but it did kind of really give me a bit of residual sort of guilt because, my whole moral purpose is to kind of, encourage and make their kind of days, better and convince them to go back into the studio instead of catastrophic. And then to hear that the music journey that I was kind of sort of promoting or had a tiny overview in, it turned into something that not only perhaps ruined them financially for a period of time, but also sapped them of their authenticity and their creativity. I thought, no, this is too at odds. And don't be wrong, there's probably some wonderful labels out there that do some amazing work. But and I do understand how stretched. I've understood very quickly how stretched it is to own a label. So I can't kind of bash some of the smaller, ineffectual ones that much, having had some experience. But I at least decided to set up something that shows. It's like a little foundation label that shows these individuals what hard work looks like, what to expect when they go, if they ever go up, and to give them the sort of the assets and use to kind of talking in a different framework. And hopefully that will help. It's got one, hasn't it?
Right. Yeah, I think it's a valuable lesson. Labels aren't such a big player today in 2024. But they still exist and they still serve a purpose and they can still be helpful and they can still be detrimental.
Yeah.
I feel sort of like pre-2000, they were the only avenue to be well known. Kind of post-2000, especially post-2010, 2015, you don't need any of it. If you have an ally that is a company, it's nice.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I think you have I never took the step of creating a label myself. It was It was one of the bands when I was at the university where I formed Coyote Music, and I formed it in 1995.
Wow.
And the reason I formed it was it was just simple booking and marketing. Instead of calling a new venue and saying, "Hello, this is Wiley. I'm the drummer for this band. Would you book me?" I was in two bands, and I would say, "Hello, this is Wiley KOEPP. I'm with Coyote Music, local promotion agency, and I have a few bands on my roster. I think one of them would be great for your venue." And eventually you go into the venue and you meet the people, and they realize, oh, that was you. But I do think it gave my bands a leg up that
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have business cards. It didn't say call Wiley the drummer, or it said call Coyote Music.
No, absolutely. I've done something similar where I sort of shoehorn myself into the record label, and suddenly more people are listening to my music because I'm not just going, "Oh, hey, it's Ben Sebastian. I've come out with a new track," and it works for the other guys as well because they're obviously we're all doing that as well on it as our own human selves, but as a collective, yeah, it was a smart move. Yeah, you've shown that it's a timeless smart move because you did it in 1995 when I was what, 13? No, 12.
Yeah, so there's several flavors of musicians. You have your musician who is only a musician. I think every band kind of has the personalities of, oh, that member goes and writes lyrics in a closet, and they bring many lyrics to us. This person chord progressions together. This person actually goes out to bars and meets people where we might play.
Yeah.
So you have your social life, you have your artist, your creative energy. I've joked for years, it's not even really a joke, saying I'm just the drummer. I've written one song. I wrote a guitar progression that one band, and I think I've been in 20 or 30 bands. One band recorded one song that I wrote. So I am not going to join a band and be the infusion of songwriting that you're looking for. But yeah, if you have the most musician in the world who sits in their bedroom and creates zero connectivity, I mean, hopefully they'll be discovered after they pass away.
Thank you, man.
Well, you're a great example. You could do that. That could be your life, but you don't. You do sit in your room and you do compose music and you do make it, but then you take that other step of creating a platform to share it and spread it, and intermingle it with other artists and seek out places where you might get a little bit of publicity, perhaps in the United States.
Yes, yeah. No, indeed. Do you know, actually, a lot of my contacts and work that I do, whether it's reaction reviews and stuff, it's all of the States, and it's a much more immersive culture. It's very difficult to. I will be being biased here, but I find Europeans a little bit more like reserved, and it takes longer to strike up a deal or relationship, or even the American attitude towards tipping is just like, oh well, this happens like so often with some of the sort of the paid contracts that I do, that as opposed to the other side of the pond, it's musically the States seem to be so open.
Yes and no.
Okay, yeah, that'd be interesting because I've given this one some thought for a while. Please go on.
So I came across an artist. Her name is Davina Robinson, and she is a blues singer, originally from Philadelphia, but she has lived in Osaka, Japan for the past 30 years. And, to me, I reviewed her album recently, and when you just have little nuggets of information, blues, Japan,
Yeah.
is not really a big mix that you think of. So I think that the term ugly American is this American sense of I know everything, and just being kind of an asshole American. Just based on those three nuggets of information, I thought, ooh, what am I going to hear? Blues music from Japan. She's amazing.
Wow.
And you could say, well, she's from Philly, she's from Philadelphia. She's got Philadelphia in her and just happened to move there. But watching videos of her online, and they even did a documentary about the blues culture in Osaka.
Wow.
That in my head drew a comparison to Liverpool before the Beatles hit.
Right.
That it is a very working class town. that just the way the Beatles heard early blues music and were inspired, so was everyone else in the world.
Wow.
And so you see this infusion of American blues in working class communities, in this case in Japan, doing incredible blues music. And that was just so uplifting and energizing to me. Golly, I was so narrow-minded.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I love the constant state of learning and being schooled. And every day we learn that we don't know everything.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I kind of got off track with where we were going from that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. I'm noticing I've got a 3-minute countdown on my thing. So what I'll do is if you're okay with it, I'll stop this one, set up another one, have a quick cigarette, a comfort break and whatever, and we'll kind of continue.
That sounds great.
Cool. Excellent. Back in a bit.
All right.
So where were we? Yes, there's always something new to learn and to pick up along the way. Every day's a school day, as the expression goes. Certainly this side of the water. Just touching briefly, I was thinking in our intermission that as an advisor at the School of Music, there must have been maybe there have been some standout challenges, whether it's trying to sort of get a person outside of their own head or preconceptions, or perhaps some other kind of incident where you've really had to go above and beyond to get the person to kind of unleash their full potential. Examples of that experience that you can draw on that might be valuable to anyone watching.
That was a gold question.
Thank you.
So I have my personal take, and then it was something that I related to many people as well. And that's, many of us, as you're young and then you're in your teens, maybe early 20s, you want to do music, and you just want to do music. When I was in junior high and high school, all I wanted to do was play drums. I got my grades to be able to get through school, but I was going to play drums and be in a famous rock band. And my sister attended a university in Boston, Massachusetts, and my parents went up there to visit her and were at a restaurant. But Boston is the location of the Berklee School of Music.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And many, many famous musicians have come through Berklee. And oddly enough, they're eating dinner with my sister, and their server that night, I don't know how it came up. My parents are very conversational. It came up that she was studying percussion at Berklee School of Music. And of course, my mother says, "Oh, my son's a drummer. He would love to go to Berklee. He would love to go to music school." And the server in the restaurant, talking to my parents, said one of the most important lessons as far as diving into music that much. She said, "Gosh, if he came to Berklee, he will leave as an amazing drummer and percussionist. That's what the school does." But she said, "Here is the thing. When you go back home, ask him if he wants to drum 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day or maybe 10 hours a day. Do you love playing the drums so much that you want to immerse yourself in it to the point of hating it?"
Yeah.
In order to become better. And it made me, that's that conversation my parents had in a restaurant with their server, I think saved me years of disappointment, because it made me think as I was probably in the US, it's 9th or 10th grade, a few years from graduating, high school education. It made me think, how much do I love drums? I love playing, but I love it because I love playing it.
Yeah.
And it made me differentiate that from wanting to become the best possible technical drummer I could possibly be. And I decided at that point, that's not what I want. I want to play music not as a hobby. I want to take it more seriously as a hobby, but I do not want drumming to be the thing that occupies my 24/7. And I think that's a lesson that certainly you asked about being an advisor at the School of Music. When kids came in from high school saying, "I want to study at the university and I want to do this," I would just say, "Are you used to practicing your instrument 5 hours a day. Every single day, even on weekends when your friends are out having a good time. How does that sound? They would say, well, you mean every day? It's like, every day, every single day. When you go home on vacation, every single day of vacation. And that helped open, I think, a lot of people's eyes of, oh God, I love music. I love playing. I don't think that I love it that much. And so just trying to do that balancing act of how much of an expertise do you want to develop? And how much do you love music versus playing your specific instrument and mastering your specific instrument? Because I mean, we see you can be popular, or you can have happiness without being an expert.
Yeah.
That was a lesson I learned and got to talk through. And some students said, yes, I want to study with this professor here, and I want to do everything they say so that I can be the best performer in the world. Great. You're at the right place. Let's do this.
Yeah. But even if the answer is no, perhaps they're not in the wrong place.
Right. And that's when you talk about, in music schools, you have different levels. Performance degrees are Carnegie Hall level, professional opera singer. That's your performance majors. And then you have several different degree plans of, all right, well, if you really like music, maybe you want to do other things. Students who came in saying, well, I love engineering and I want a performance degree in music. I was like, well, your engineer professors are going to hate you, and your music professors are going to hate you, because you won't have hours a day to do both, at least in 4 or 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. It's a very interesting conversation that you alluded to. Posits a very interesting question that I think, even as adults, we probably don't sit down and answer enough about whatever it is that we've got ourselves mixed up in this year. And when you were going through that, I was like, yeah, actually, I'd like to be doing more composing. I need to be a little bit more regimented with that, but I also like this. And yeah, it's made me think a little bit about structure.
It's an important lesson to learn. And I think for myself, when even before I went to university, my parents were pretty strict. You go there and you get your degree, and then do whatever you want. You can go be in a rock band afterwards. But certainly many bands are discovered when they're teenagers, or when they're in their early 20s, maybe studying at university, and you get this opportunity. This label will sign you and we'll put you on the road opening for the Rolling Stones. That's a no-brainer. You got to quit school and you got to go open for the Stones. So, there's no absolutes, but I think when opportunities are presented to us, or maybe you're trying to open doors, it's important to think of where you are and what actually makes you happy. I'd be happy opening for the Rolling Stones and going on a 1.5 year long tour and not eating dinner with my family for a year, or not being able, if you have a girlfriend or boyfriend, not seeing them. Maybe they fly out to 1 show or 2 shows. Are you good with putting every relationship in your life on hold?
Yeah,
maybe yes, maybe no.
Important questions that are often not considered. And it's no wonder that you see so many stories of musicians becoming burnt out or going off the rails or whatever, because there's always other fundamentals that perhaps they hadn't considered, and also once they're in the machine, not given the space to consider.
So this is a very cheesy comparison, very American, very cheesy comparison, but I read a video or saw a snippet of an interview with John Bon Jovi recently, talking about Britney Spears.
Yes.
All right. And, for those not familiar, Britney she had her whole conservatorship, and there was a special on Netflix and everything. And maybe she was manipulated as a teen and these things that happened. But today, at her age today, if you follow her on Instagram, she seems troubled.
Yes.
And it's difficult. And something that John Bon Jovi, of all people, expressed was sort of empathy. And he said as soon as his band started getting success, and friends of his, you get this influx of money, and people would buy, mansions out in Beverly Hills or mansions, anywhere in the world when you have that much money. And what he saw was when people leave their units, their family units, or maybe friend units, and just go live in the middle of the fray. If you move into the Sunset Strip, but
Yeah.
you grew up in rural Idaho, you're suddenly surrounded by an element that you don't know anything about, and you don't know people, and that can take you way off track. And he said, early on, he realized that he needed to return to his home. He's famously from New Jersey, and surround himself with his high school buddies and his family, and go have dinner at grandma's house and everything. That years helped keep him grounded. Of, I'm going to go be crazy and go tour for 2 years at a time, but then I'm going to come home and recenter and figure out what's important in my life. And, not that everybody has a family or have a lot of friends or even a hometown, but the idea of becoming famous and then plopping yourself in the middle of unknown crazy world.
Yeah, it's like the lion's den, isn't it?
Yeah, where the best thing is the next fix instead of dinner at grandma's house.
Yeah, no, indeed. Yeah.
That can be very destructive. So I thought it was just really weird to hear wisdom in a Bon Jovi Britney Spears
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah. No, but I mean, in fact, that's one thing, that's one experience that crosses all genres and boundaries is, the and the type, such success can actually take on the mental health. And yeah, it's amazing. I was watching there's a lot of scientific evidence to sort of suggest that the dopamine hits we get along the journey are enough to sustain us, and when we actually reach the arrival point, we're not interested anymore. Then it gravitates towards something else, and probably something that's maladaptive. And someone being not so famous but productive in your endeavors and being on the journey to that goal over a long period of time is actually much better for you.
Yeah, you dopamine, and I just think, I'm adult and I've been playing music for years, and people, ask like, I didn't become famous or rich and famous as a performer. So all right, well but man, but playing for me, when I get to play music in front of a crowd and I just see one glint in an eye, or I see one smile to a lyric or a rhythmic piece, that is my fix. Oh my gosh. When I hit the snare and I see somebody's head going in concert with the snare drum and the bass, oh my gosh. That's it.
Yeah. It is when you see people react to stuff that you do, it's awesome. And I think that's I've always kind of felt about music as a reactor, and I kind of fell into this reaction review thing on YouTube as an extension of what I intended out to be a sort of like almost like a quasi radio type of show thing. Again, aiming at something and then refining the aim later on. And the feedback I get is like, you're nuts, because they get re-energized back with their music after kind of pushing this single for so long, and then they suddenly see some. I'm just an average guy, but they, they see me like going like this, and they're like, then they're doing it as well, and they're like, I'm energized, and it's that small reciprocity. It doesn't a stadium full of 50,000 people and $1 million in the bank. You can't buy that feeling.
Some of your reaction videos actually made me want to start reaction videos myself, and I don't know if I'll do it.
Yay, go for it.
But you throw on a song, and the first few seconds you're kind of getting used to it, and all right, well, is this good or bad, or do I like it, is it well done, I don't know. And then when a moment hits and you just say like, yeah, right, that's why we listen. And
that's how it is. I've had some songs that have knocked me into tears and all this kind of stuff, and it's just like, am I really pushing record right now? But that is it. What you see is what you get. So you not wanting to, be the style of drummer that rehearses for practices for 5 hours a day, and And then on that path, you obviously not only diversified into the university work and then Coyote music. And what I know Coyote music to be is kind of, you know, sort of a written press like based review type affair. How was that bit going on? Are there any other facets to Coyote music I need to be aware of? Talk me through setting that up and that experience.
Yeah, that's really fun. So I shared earlier that the reason I started it was to just have a front to book my bands. Like, this is the business that represents these artists. Well, I did that and did pretty well, to where my bands went from the Tuesday 7 p.m. band to the Friday and Saturday 8, 9, 10 p.m. bands. And, you know, crowds went from 5 to 30, maybe 50 or 100. And that's what it was first. It was a booking front. When it came time for us to put out our albums, though, a friend of mine loaned me money to do the manufacturing for my two band's first CDs. He graduated college with a useful degree that had an infusion of cash. And he said, "Oh, you need $1,000 to print CDs? I'll give you $1,000. He said, assuming it sells, I would like my $1,000 back. If it tanks, that's my investment. I'll stop." And these bands did well enough. I was able to pay him back in short order, and that was all great. Friendship is still intact. But I realized at that moment that when I put out CDs and Coyote Music was on the bottom, I realized, holy cow, this is now a record label. I started a record label.
Yeah.
So I'm a booking agent and I'm a record label. And then I had other bands say, "Gosh, your bands are playing on the weekends and you have CDs and you're playing all the time and you're doing well. Would you do that for my band?"
Yeah.
And I took on a couple, and I thought, well, now I'm a management agency, label, promoter, booker. And so I kind of wore those hats. When I did move to New York and got a job at a major label, I used that portfolio of work to help get me that job. Say, look what I did in Austin, Texas. I've managed 3 bands and I booked and we're playing weekends. I think I can help. I know what talent sounds like. I know what good music sounds like. And so that got me that job. And that was right around the year 2000, which, if you don't remember clearly, that's when Nap was at its highest. And LimeWire, people downloading music. Lars Ulrich
took forever
from
in a
Metallica.
day, didn't it? Oh,
yeah.
It took forever.
Metallica started suing its fans for pirating their music, and it was a special time in music. But major labels crumbled, and the music industry just fell apart, kind of in 2000, 2001. And I was one of the victims of that whole process. So I find myself not in the music business, being paid with a wage. So I decided to revive Coyote Music. And I thought, well, what can I do? I'm just a guy, like you just said. We're just guys.
Yeah.
Value do I have? What can I possibly offer people? And what I thought about was, while I was working for a label in New York City, there were so many incredible bands. I was out 6 nights a week at label showcases. I was going to see new bands. My job at the time, I worked for a smaller label called Farm Club, that we were one of the first labels where you could go upload your music. And actual employees of the label would listen to every single song uploaded. And we had a television show. And if you were good, we'd get you on the show. And if you were really good, we would sign you. And so in an 8-hour workday, I would probably listen to 150 to 200 songs a day. I just had an enormous queue. And on day one, I listened to all 4.5 minutes of a song and then did thumbs up, thumbs down. And that's not an efficient way to evaluate thousands of artists. And so, for better or worse, I became the guy that would listen to, the first 20 or 30 seconds of a song, because what you can tell is, not everybody has a budget for high production levels. So you can hear a good band recorded on a shitty mic and still tell they're a good band.
Yeah.
But it developed the sense of hearing music and saying, are these musicians serious about what they're doing? Are they playing in time? Are they playing together? even if you stick one microphone in the middle of a room, a band that cares about their product will at least tell, oh, the cymbals are too hot. We need to move the mic way across the room so that there's a balance. So I began to figure out quickly, are these people serious about their music or not? Okay, they are. Is it good? And what does good mean? Is it catchy? Just things like that. It really helped to hear thousands upon thousands of songs in short order. Like, what's good? And it made me reevaluate what is good. The genre of rap rock was very popular then.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Biscuit world and
Yeah.
boy bands ruled the world. But I think we were vaguely looking for something like that. And I heard amazing folk artists and acoustic guitarists and some country bands. But what I heard the most when I good that I thought, man, this band should be more well known. I would take it down the hall for someone else to listen to and corroborate so that we could figure out if we needed to pitch this higher up the chain. And the types of things that I heard from sharing things that I thought were great with other people was stuff like, I know that artist, their manager is a dick. Nobody wants to work with them. And I thought, we're not going to work with this artist because their manager's a dick? But that's a great artist who writes good songs. Or one of my biggest heartbreaks was there was a really heavy band who I was in love with. And I pitched them. And I thought, this is going to be a hit. And we went and people listened. The feedback was, well, the lead singer is fat, so I don't think we're going to sign them. Oh my God.
Wow.
That anger.
And when that into the realm of heavy music, we kind of got used to it in pop for a long time. But when now it's coming to images becoming part of, underground metal and heavy rock and stuff, it's a disgusting, demeaning perspective that has no place in any industry. Sorry, continue.
Yeah. Well, what maybe, all right, and I was the only person who had heard good music and everyone I liked became famous. That's not the case. But in this one instance, we did not sign that band. Another label did. And within a year, they had sold 1 million copies. There's some skill in here. and of course, like a lot of bands that everyone said, that's trash. No business, terrible, no one would ever listen to it. That happens too.
Well, yeah, but sometimes it's okay to have a contrarian opinion. Sometimes it does actually work out even years later, But yeah, what about the ear fatigue you must have had listening to so much content all day?
Yes. I mean, absolutely. I did what you did right now. I had my on and it was just new song. Listen, stop, new song until you had to go to the bathroom or maybe you had to go get a soda or something. It was bizarre, but I'm actually, in hindsight, I'm glad I did have that job for longer than I did. It really burned me out on a lot of aspects of music and business. But with your quote from a few minutes ago of what does Coyote music do? Once I was out of that setting, I realized what I can do with Coyote music is I have a musical background now, and I have an industry background now, and sort of an advising background. I could use Coyote music to work with artists. For a while, I called it music artist consultant, and that was not a good name and whatever. But what the most frustrated is when there was a band that people didn't like the manager and it was hurting the artist, or when there was a good band, no one ever told the band, you would be famous, but everyone thinks your singer's too fat, or you would be famous except your drummer too destructive at gigs. So nobody wants to book you. No one ever told the artist this. So how are they going to not even change? In the case of the larger lead singer, fuck the haters. They kept their singer and they became famous. So great. But at least so I thought, I have Coyote music. I can just say your music is great. Your recordings lack bottom end, so they don't sound good when people listen to them. And that's hurting your potential. So remix your records, remaster them, and put more low end. Or image is not everything, but you're a great band and everyone wears, a black t-shirt and jeans and stares at their guitars while they play. If you moved when you played, you would have more audience engagement and that would open new doors for you. Just it frustrated me that there was no feedback from the industry to artists. So I did that a lot. I would submit their materials and I would just give feedback.
Yeah.
And a lot of positive, and then say, I'm going to give you some constructive criticism. And that would be it, of not saying, yeah, but your singer sucks. That's not helpful. But saying, gosh, you put your singer in position where they're trying to hit these high notes that they can't hit. And that really, harms the peak of your song when they hit the high note and they're warbly on it.
Yeah.
So get a bad singer to sing the high harmonies. That would solve that. So I loved being able to have to say what I couldn't say before.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. That's I sometimes I hear some I'm always very conscious that this is a journey that they're on. So you can't sort of say, well, that absolutely fucking sucks, or this sounded absolute shit, even in the where it's everything's all good, whatever, but it's just, you can hear like they're going through their sort of super egotistical side or whatever, and it goes on for too long or whatever. There are delicate ways of approaching it, but it's still real. And we'll insert a sort of like nugget, a seed in there somewhere, and then hopefully they later sort of come to sort of realize and address it. And everyone's learning, but it's a journey. And for people to not be all the things that are perhaps leaving them unpolished in some way. It's great that you are out there that will sort of say it how it needs said for the benefit of them and in a non-harmful way.
Yeah. I mean, I think about my own career, my early bands. I refused to play drumming with a metronome, and I regret that so much, because my band's early albums, we didn't record with click tracks, and I was not a very steady drummer, and so every fill at the end of the phrase would speed up, and then I'd overcorrect and slow down at the beginning of the next line, and it pains me to listen to some of that stuff now. Then I joined a disco rock band, and we played with some backing tracks, just some loops and things, but it was a lot set to loops, and that was my metronome, and I played with that band for 5 or so years, and I realized, oh, this is at the end of every fill, I realized I was slightly ahead of the beat. So that was kind of my 5 years of playing with a metronome, and it's helped me a lot. So these days I am primarily writing, articles about artists and reviews about artists and their releases. And my personal belief is anyone who any music and puts it out there is something positive to say about that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe they suck at guitar and they record, but what they did was they were bold enough to put their emotions onto a recorded track and put it out there.
Sure. Absolutely.
And that's good. And so, if you're looking at things I've written over the years in Coyote music, not every band is going to make you say, God, that's great. No, that's not reality. Not every band is great. But when I try to prop up an artist for the things that they are doing well, that their live shows are great. One of my artists, I cannot name them. One of my favorite artists, all of their records failed to capture the energy of their live show. And so I actually don't enjoy listening to their recorded music because it's flat and it's hollow. But when I go to a live show, I'm jumping and I am in it and it's killer. And so I just think, why don't you just release live albums?
Yeah.
So there is good in even the worst thing that you might hear. And I think it's important to encourage that, so that people who are sharing their emotions feed on the things that they're doing well and develop those things.
Yeah. That's rather to go back into the studio or go back and sit composing and give themselves the space and time to develop whatever it is in terms of whether it's technique or the next kind of bit of kit that they can afford in their next paycheck or whatever, you know, the next software upgrade, all of that, you know, as opposed to do something that's potentially destructive. Because if you've got yourself involved in musical endeavors, there is usually a part of kind of self-healing, you know, that kind of that, and it's the same with any hobby, you know, that we put our minds to. We don't do it just because, you know, we do it because it's enjoyable, takes our mind off certain things, and we get a little lost in our own little world, you know, for a bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm seeing we might be toward time.
Yes, no, we are indeed. It's a podcast episode, but that's totally cool. I appreciate that we haven't actually spoken about some of your current projects and the bands. We don't really have to fit it in, so I will come back to you on that in due course. But I suppose just you can spend the last couple of minutes either promoting Coyote music to attract people over to you, or some words of wisdom to those watching, and anything else you might want to say. The platform's yours.
I think it's almost simple what an artist's goal should be. We've talked about authenticity, and that's very important. But even deeper, there are so many people who just play an acoustic guitar and sing. That's great. That's fine. I do that now. But when you are putting yourself as an artist, I think it's important to think, what about you do you think is worth someone to see you? So on any given night, there's 1,000 shows out there. Why would I go see your show instead of the 1,000 other shows? And I think artists should think about that. Like, what am I doing? You know, is it about how or are my lyrics a little edgy, or do I, you know, play happy hours that it's already full and I just want to be background music? Whatever it is, and I said this to young musicians as an advisor, and then within my own bands, whatever it is you do that you think is different and unique, explode that by 10,000 times, and make yourself the most yourself you can possibly be. Don't try to Radiohead.
Yeah,
there are a billion bands that have done that. Don't try to your idols. What your idols have done, you know, infuse it into yourself, and then you be more Ben Sebastian than any motherfucker on the planet.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. And you phrased that, you know, you know, I was be as authentic as I can, and it's given me some extra kind of thoughts in terms of how I sort of present, double down on the darkness a little bit, you know, things like this. So even someone I consider myself a little bit on the way of my journey, it's valuable advice. And yeah, so Coyote music, take it on reviews as and when they come in, so they can find you through the website. And I, you know, thoroughly love reading the bits and pieces that you've put up, and especially the bits and pieces you've done for me. It's always charming to get one of your reviews back, and it's good to see such an ambassador for not only just sort of the music sort of industry, but also just musicians as human beings. You know, a fascinating conversation, and a couple of hours in, all too short still for that. So we will definitely come back at a later stage. Thank you so much.
Well, what I am taking from this is you just said, I might get it tattooed on my arm. Double down on the darkness.
Yeah, it's a cool tattoo.
My mantra from now on.
Double down on the darkness. There we go. Cool. Wow. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yep.